Welcome to the Halcyon Project. I'm your host, Evan. Let's jump in. So this is the inaugural upload of the Halcyon Project on the Halcyon Project YouTube channel. So what are we all about? Well, the Halcyon Project is going to seek to be a bit of a thought experiment and a forum for discussing solutions to the ongoing decay and implosion of Western civilization. Most of these videos or podcasts, whatever you want to call them, are going to be single take, done in one continuous shot, not a lot of editing. And it's just looking to be a forum to find like-minded individuals who are interested in discussing what can be done to deal with our corruption problem that we have in the West. And I don't mean political, I mean social, moral, and spiritual corruption. And so that's kind of where we're at. There won't be much talk of problems. There's a lot of talk in conservative media and conservative social media circles about problems and very little talk of solutions. So if you want to learn about problems, there's lots of places you can go for that. This is designed to be a space where we're going to talk about what we do about those problems rather than complain that they exist. So a big part of the Halcyon Project's vision is to establish a system or a framework to build a system on top of that will allow individuals to form communities with an eye towards repairing the traditions that have been lost, damaged, or destroyed over the course of the last century or two. Along with that, there will be discussions of what I have been calling enclave communities. I know there's a couple of places out there that are doing something similar to this in an expressly Catholic or Reformed context. I think religion is an important part of that. I don't fall into the category of a Catholic or a Reformed person. That's not to say that I'm not part of the greater Christian sphere. We can unpack that maybe in future uploads as we go along here. But this isn't a new or unique idea to myself or those around me, but just looking to talk through what that might look like in a couple of different contexts and from a couple of different angles. Ideally, what would be nice is if we could come up with a framework that would allow people to start enclave communities or Christian boroughs, or however you want to look at that, in their own local contexts. Online is great. It has its place, but it certainly has limitations. And that becomes more and more obvious the further down the digital rabbit hole we all go. Certainly that was brought to light in stark contrast during the events of the great fire drill of 2020. It's just not the same saying goodbye to your dying grandmother over an iPad as being next to her hospital bed. And that's pretty self-evident for anybody who's lived through it. So as part of the Halcyon Project, we certainly need to be thinking about parallel systems, and that would be parallel systems of governance, political systems, economic systems, religious institutions, and not parallel in that one would remove themselves completely from the world around them, similar to something more nefarious like a Jonestown or a Heaven's Gate cult kind of idea, but rather to build systems that are self-sufficient so that the individuals in those systems, while not self-sufficient, they are still co-sufficient on the other people in the system, have another way of dealing with life and the world other than to rely simply on their governments, which, for anybody who's paid attention for the last 5 or so years, it should be very obvious that those systems cannot be relied upon if you're anything other than completely with the program. Certainly a part of that is going to be a focus on childbearing and a redefinition of wealth. it's all the rage in conservative talk circles to discuss the problem of reducing fertility across the world, and that is certainly a problem. But it's only a problem for those without children, at least in a way. There's all kinds of talk of the implosion or the falling apart of social safety nets and old age security and pensions. But if you go back to a more traditional way of living and a more traditional family structure, it becomes a non issue if you can rely on your children and your children can rely on you as you both age, in that you should be taking care of your family both up and down that generational hierarchy. And pension should be extra, not what you're living on exclusively. And so, in that context, wealth should probably be redefined from simply financial gain to a more holistic view between money, family, shelter, all of that, where the larger the family, in a very real sense, you may have less available cash flow, but you do have much greater wealth in the long term and in a spiritual sense as well. But certainly, if you're looking at a world where you're not going to have old age security and welfare, who is going to take care of you when you're old if not your own flesh and blood? So, childbearing being a good in and of itself is also a blessing that has been severely downplayed in popular culture for a lot of decades. The propaganda against childbearing is everywhere. You don't have to look far to see it. And the ice appears to be starting to break on that just a little bit, at least within certain circles. But that's not to say it's gone. So there will certainly be some discussions in that direction um, as we go along here. Uh, so I've already mentioned the idea of forming enclave communities. That's something that's not going to happen immediately. It's not something that I'm terribly interested in administering for people remotely. It's something I'm interested in pursuing myself on a local level and maybe discussing here and maybe giving blueprints or ideas on how that could be instituted in other places. I think the more of that kind of enclave community or Christian borough thing that could exist would only help the other communities of a similar persuasion all the more, even if those communities differ on theological ideas or tradition. The enemy of my enemy is my friend in a lot of ways. And so if you are of a Christian persuasion and involved in a Christian borough type community that is embedded within your local area, obviously you're going to be giving preferential treatment in business to those in your community, but perhaps as an extension of that, a network of these communities, even if they are not denominationally aligned or aligned on every theological issue, perhaps preferential treatment should be given to those other enclave communities, even across those denominational lines when it comes to business, trade, and relationship, where despite a vast theological gulf between something like a Baptist and a Catholic, when it comes right down to it, on most social issues, they're a lot more closely aligned than a Baptist and somebody who's a secular liberal or a Catholic and somebody who's secular and liberal. And so, as an extension of that, these enclave communities that we're going to discuss and talk through whether they're feasible or not, a core factor with them will be a return to goodness, truth, and beauty, which are essentially the classical attributes, at least in the Western tradition, of what could be considered an overarching or objective goodness. In some ways, you could look at them as three aspects of God Himself. So there'll be a lot of talk and emphasis put into those three categories as we move forward here. And the other big thing that could be a bit of a hot button is the idea of diversity. Now, I think diversity is a good thing, but I don't think diversity is a good thing the way that it's been spun. When I say diversity, I mean real diversity. And I'm not sure how much of this I can get into in a public space like YouTube. But when you forcibly combine cultures together and have them living in close quarters and insist on tolerance to a fault, you don't end up with diversity. You end up with a a homogenous stew of varying people that all act a certain way in public, while in private, their personal traditions and histories are eroded and diluted, especially as the generations progress. And so that's a problem, and that's a problem that needs to be addressed. Like I said, I'm not sure how directly I can address that in on a public social media platform, but we're going to see what we can do as we go forward here. That's kind of what the Halcyon Project is seeking to do, seeking to talk about, where we're looking to go here. If that sounds like something that would interest you, there's a like and subscribe down below and ring the bell, all that fun stuff. And we'll kind of leave it there for now. And if you have ideas or if you have anything to add to the conversation or want to get a conversation started, we will see you in the comments.